Let's talk today about the value of nature play and natural open-ended toys. Why do these crunchy moms or granola moms want the children to be outside? Is it a trend or is it more than that, right? Are there physiological reasons and psychological reasons to get our kids outside and play more? And from my perspective, there definitely is. I will tell you, I walked into a preschool once to check it out, kind of find out if it was going to be a good fit for my boys. And when I walked in, one of the things that I noticed was that the different play areas around the outside of the garden, it was mostly an outdoor program, an outside garden area, had these beautiful, colorful shades. And when you first walk in, you think, oh, this is aesthetically pleasing. Look at all the beautiful colors for the young kids. But then I later asked the director, I said, did you do this on purpose with the shading of the sun? And he was a little bit confused. He said, well, sure. I mean, we move the kids around during the day so that the sun isn't hitting them and they're not getting too much direct sunlight during the day. And I said, it's more than that. It goes a lot deeper. I said, if you're moving the kids, throughout the day, what that does internally is give them a sense of grounding in the environment. And if perhaps, let's say they move over here for snack time, they know it's the middle of the day and the sun is the highest. They move over here, the sun is now over here, but they're having their swinging time or climbing on the haystacks or tiki hut time. And then they move over here, now it's about 2 or 3 p.m. and that's usually where they nap. Right there. And then when they go back over into this area, it's about 4 o'clock now. And that's when they do the story time under the shade. And the moms and dads are starting to pick them up. And I said, what that does for the child is give them a sense of security because they don't know how to tell time. They're itty bitty. They're 18 months to 4 years old at this point. So they can't tell time, but they do know where the sun is. And whether or not they're conscious of it, they become aware of the way that the sun is moving throughout the day. The time is passing throughout the day. What they also learn from being in an outdoor program, such as this one, is they learn about seasons. They experience the mud after a big storm. They see that branches have fallen, that some of the crops in the garden or the flowers might be ruined or trampled on. When it's really scorching hot outside, the grass is a little bit more stale and kind of crunchy. So you might even see a child spraying it down to wet it while they run across with their bare feet. They listen to the sounds of the birds, and some of the birds are maybe not so strong or so present in the wintertime. And again, they're not conscious of it. This isn't a thought that they have, but it does start to give kids a sense of time passing and days and weeks, and they start to sort of pick up on the rhythms of the world and of nature. And you'll see children who are outside in nature, sometimes it looks like they're just sort of staring off into space. That's a beautiful, powerful thing. They're wondering about the things about them. I just took my kids on a little nature walk today. We went hiking at a waterfall area down here. It's called McKinney Falls State Park. And we went hiking and we didn't bring any toys. And I always tell parents, don't bring any toys. If your child can't play with a big pile of dirt, then you're doing it wrong, right? We want to give kids an opportunity to learn to distract themselves. There's value in that. There's value in the nothing time, right? Just being outside in nature and having to find something to play with. My kids were walking up to a big bed of flowers and picking up a blue bonnet or a dandelion. They were, blowing the petals off of things. They were watching the bees go from flower to flower. They were climbing the rocks and picking up sticks and sword fighting with sticks and using sticks to balance themselves crossing the creek beds. And when the long grass was really tall, I noticed that they stopped. They were cautious. And I said, you know what? I noticed that you got a little bit nervous right there. Tall grass is sometimes where animals hide, like snakes and lizards, and we don't want to disturb their home. And so we would retreat and go back up to the other side. Sometimes I bring toys. Sometimes they might happen to have a toy on them, but I really try not to because I know the value of just being outdoors and just being present. And that's something that we've really lost in today's society. We are not really present with our children. We're always finding ways to distract them. And like I've talked about in some other episodes on my podcast or in other videos, that if we are always entertaining our children, then we start to create passive children who are not really using their brain or their imagination or their bodies because they're being entertained, versus a child where there's really nothing around to entertain them. they have to entertain themselves, which means using their body to climb and crawl and walk, or picking up something and turning it into a toy, using their imagination to be resourceful and create something out of nothing, which is imagination, right? And you've heard me say it before, imagination is responsible for innovation. I cringe sometimes when I go into a restaurant and I see a family sit down at the table and they just pop up the iPad. I think, oh my gosh, you didn't even give them time to look around, to take in the environment, to look at the art that they might see at the walls, to touch the chair, the leather or the velvet or the wood, whatever the table is made of, to look at the menu and examine the different shapes and patterns of the letters and the pictures. And there wasn't really any time for settling into the environment. It's immediately like put something in front of their brains, right? It's the same way when we go to get our haircuts, and the only reason I go to this place is because they cut the kids' hair really, really, really well. But there are so many beautiful, wonderful things to play with in this place. But as soon as the kids walk in, there's a TV at every single station. And they immediately greet them. What would you like to watch today? And I thought, oh my gosh, what message does that send our children? There's indoor playgrounds, all over the place now. And we do frequent these. I'm not going to lie. We totally do, especially on a rainy day or where it's like really, really, really bitter cold. We go to these indoor playgrounds and I look around and I think these are beautiful, tunnels and swings and bounce houses and things like that. If they took all of the color out and it was wooden and nets and a little bit more basic, it would be just as fun, and it would allow the children's minds to color everything, right? To maybe the net is something that's, over the ocean and we're going to go fishing, and maybe the slide is not really a slide, but we're in a tree house in the middle of the rainforest, or, maybe this could be a spaceship, this little hut, whatever it is. If it were more basic, more bare, but still a contraption that encouraged gross motor play and exploration, it would still be just as valuable, if not more valuable. But now when you walk in, there's disco lights across the slide, and there's a disco ball up here, and there's all this music on all the time, and there's these like lasers and stuff, everywhere, and it's too much. I usually can last about an hour and a half in there, but as soon as we leave, I usually think, when the rain stops or when it warms up, let's just go be outside today. Let's just go run around in the grass, or let's go for a walk by the lake, because I know that just as much as I need that earthing time, so do my kids. They need that too. And we're not doing enough of that as a family. Some families, they don't want to go, camping anymore, or they don't want to go boating unless there's an activity or some things to do, some way to entertain everybody. They don't feel like there's value in that. But some of the best conversations and some of the best play times can really happen when we just get outside and, be a part of nature. You've also heard me talk a little bit, if you listen to my podcast or if you followed some of my other videos, you've heard me talk about the value of natural materials in the home and for kids to play with. And it's deeper than just plastics break. They totally do. They're just not good quality toys most of the time. But a toy that's been alive before becomes enlivened in the kid's hand. It's almost like it can have a soul to it because it has once lived. And that's about as crunchy as I'm gonna get for you, but bear with me. If you take a toy that's made from plastic and you hold it in your hand, and then you take, for instance, a felt piece of fruit that's made out of felt, right? And you hold them both in your hand, the plastic is cold. It doesn't really feel alive. There's not really as much of a connection to it, but the felt was once alive. A silk scarf, silk from a silkworm, was once alive. Wood was once alive. It was a tree, and it warms in the hand, and it draws your attention. It draws your soul out a little bit more because it's a way of connecting with nature. Just like if you were to go outside and collect baskets of rocks and berries, peach pits, sticks, grass, flowers, pine cones, different gemstones, crystals, things like that, or natural clay from a riverbed. We used to love that when my kids were little. Would bring in some natural clay to play with. Beeswax is wonderful for modeling, beeswax crayons, but really just moving things through your hands that were once alive does something to the soul. You've heard me talk before about head, heart, hands, right? That's the Waldorf foundation or philosophy. And when you're playing with something from the earth with your hands, it feels good in your heart. And as you start to create, You start to feel it in your mind. And by working with your hands and your heart, you're activating the neurons in the brain and building the child's brain, wiring, pre-wiring for enjoyment and love and creation and imagination. And the natural materials, not only do they become more alive in your hand and they're more connected and inspire more imagination, but they're also healthier for the environment, right? It does feel like you're touching nature a little bit more. Also, some of the plastic toys tend to be very pre-formed. They're already pre-decided, I guess is a better way to say that. A cloth doll with a bare face and just sort of a blanket skirt is still a doll, and it can still be a doll. But then if you buy a plastic doll from the store that doesn't really bend and move very well the way that a real live baby would, or perhaps it has a blonde curl right here and a bow, it's already a blonde girl. It can't be much more than that. Just like a Barbie that maybe comes with a, full lemonade stand and an apron and whatever. Well, she's a cook, and that's pretty much all she's going to be. She's going to run this lemonade stand. We're limiting the children's imagination by deciding what the toy is, versus when we have toys that are open-ended, that means the child gets to decide, what is this item going to be? It can be anything that you want it to be. And that's what I love to tell my children when they pick up something and they go, what is this? I love to say, that can be anything you want it to be. You could do so many things with that. What are your ideas? And I love to see what they decide. And then they'll tell me, okay, it's a rocket ship. I'm like, all right, it's a rocket ship. Where are we going to go with this rocket ship? I don't assume the rocket ship is going to space because they haven't told me that yet. I might say, where's the rocket ship going to go? And they might say, the rocket ship's going to go to school. So all the kids can explore the rocket ship. I'm like, that's cool. Let's go to school with the rocket ship. We always want to let our kids fill in the blanks. So we use open-ended statements when our children are playing. And sometimes it's important to take the toys outside because, again, we want nature. We want our children to listen to the sounds of the wind and the animals, the squirrels scurrying across the leaves and the trees. We want them to, take a dinosaur and, bring it up the tree branches and stack rocks together to make a little house for, one of their little fairy dolls or something like that. And it can be very exciting to see what your kids do when they're outside in nature because they're inspired. They're getting the vitamin D from the sun on their skin. They're listening to the wind and the sounds of things around them. And it's starting to touch right here in their heart, their souls, and it inspires more play. There's also less distraction than there is at home. When we talk about open-ended toys, we definitely don't have anything that's battery operated or electronic because that is definitely making a decision for your child. If you press a button and it says, it's a car and it says, feel the power, feel the speed. Well, perhaps I didn't want it to be a car because I'm a child and I want it to be an ambulance today. But if it's talking about being a race car, then that's really all that it is. It takes me out of my fantasy and anchors me back into reality. And that's not what we want for our kids. We want them to stay in fantasy as long as possible. And there's something about being outside in nature that just is naturally open-ended. It could start raining out of nowhere, or suddenly it's a sunny day, but the clouds start to get a little bit darker and you'll see a child go, I feel like it's gonna rain today. And we go, uh-oh, what should we do? If there's thunder, it's not safe, but if it just drizzles, do we want to play in the rain? Perhaps we'll find a little puddle. Maybe we can make a boat. Maybe we could put our dolls on a boat and we find a big, huge piece of bark and we, fasten a sail to it, or maybe we throw it into the pond and we, watch it go down the drain and into the pond or the creek or, wherever it is that we are. We watch the way that the water falls onto the dirt and it starts to get kind of moist and we see some of the bugs from the bottom float up to the top and try to scurry away. We notice that none of the animals are really around when it starts to rain. Where do they go, right? This is all part of outdoor play and exploration. I would really encourage you, if you do have play-based programs in your community, and I would really encourage you to look at those for your children. My kids go to school where they're outside during sun, rain, snow. It doesn't matter what it is. They dress for all weather and they have all weather clothes whenever they go there. But I know that they're going to be outside every day, and I know that they're going to be exploring and creating beautiful, wonderful adventures together. And there's no screen time there. They're not on any computers. They're not learning to code at 4 years old. They're just playing and they're just being a part of nature. And I know what it does for the soul, and I know what it does for the spirit. They come home and they are exhausted from using their imagination, and there's dirt underneath their fingernails. So I know that they've been eating with their dirty hands and getting those beautiful natural germs into their body to build their immune system. I know that they're exposed to the elements of the world and they're becoming tougher because of that. I know that they're scaling creeks barefoot and they're toughening up their feet. I know that when it starts to rain, they know the difference between safe rain and in unsafe rain. I know that they know not to go in the tall grass. These are things that they learn naturally through conversations with their guides, their teachers, and it's really a beautiful, wonderful, childhood to have, to get outside more. I've heard from some listeners, they say, well, I know you talk a lot about outdoor play, and we try to do it, but we live in Alaska or we live in Norway, and it's like really cold. And, some families are better about really just bundling their kids up and getting outside anyway. But other kids just can't really tolerate the cold as much, or maybe you live in the desert and it's really, really, really hot where you are. I would still encourage you to bring nature into the home. In fact, one of the best Waldorf schools in the nation is in Chicago. It's in the urban really dense metroplex of Chicago, but they bring a lot of nature inside. So there are some ways that you can do that. Of course, like I mentioned before, you can have baskets of rocks, gemstones, crystals, sticks, pine cones, peach pits, avocado pits, different fruit peels and things like that for kids to play with in the kitchen areas. You can have fruits and vegetables that are made from felt or wood. Felt is a little bit better when it's food. You can have sensory bins made from rice and beans and rock salt, right? You can have wooden creatures and miniatures and things to play with, silk scarves, felt crowns, real materials from the outside can be made, like beeswax can be in the art station, beeswax crayons, modeling clay, you have to get it a little bit wet, watercolors that are made from natural materials. Perhaps you're doing an art project and you're dyeing paper. You can use dye. You can take beets, for example, and put them in a pot of boiling water with a little bit of vinegar, and all of the color from the beets will go into the water, and now you've got a purple dye. You can dye silks or scarves or rags. Yellow onions, if you take the skin off and you boil the skin, it becomes orange. You can do that with a lot of fruits and vegetables. And there are plenty of ideas on Pinterest and YouTube for making natural dyes, but that's all ways that you could bring nature into the home. Perhaps you have an indoor garden in the home, whether it's succulents or it can be cactus, herbs. You can grow, there's lots of herbs and nuts and fruits that grow very nicely in an indoor environment as long as you have lots of sunlight. You can have a little box garden right by the windowsill if you choose. Wind chimes are beautiful ways. You just hang it outside and then you can listen to the winds go through the chimes all day long. Making sun catchers, decorating the window with window clings and watching the way that the sun comes in, creating prisms together, gemstones, holding gemstones in your hand as you listen to a story about creatures from the outside, mythical creatures like gnomes and leprechauns and fairies and all of this. And some people say, well, I'm not really keen on the way that Waldorf uses mythical creatures to teach things, right? Like we've got the number gnomes and the 12 brothers that teach the months of the year and the seasons and the days of the week and things like that. Everyone says, well, that's lying to kill children. It's not. It's not lying. You're not trying to convince them that they're real, and we don't know for sure that they're not real. They are creatures that many people have in their imagination before ever having seen one. It's possible that it's part of a spiritual world that we're just not really in touch with anymore. Many people believe in angels without ever having seen one, but we know that they're there. We have visions of them without it being something concrete that we can touch. And Waldorf really inspires kids to still be in touch with the spiritual world that's inside. That imaginative quality is really beautiful. And again, imagination is responsible for innovation, and we like to meet children where they are. So when we're teaching and learning and exploring the world with our children, we want to be sure that we're not, using things that are too abstract. And for kids, a gnome is not abstract. A gnome is real. A leprechaun is real. The leprechaun might be hiding in the clovers. To them, dinosaurs are very real. I see a dinosaur behind the tree, Mom, it's right there. And I like to get lost in that world with them and enjoy imagination with them as well. Getting outside and playing in nature is a beautiful thing. If you can't do it, like I said, you bring it into the home. Not every place. Some of you might live in the city where there's not really access to a lot of nature outside. I would really encourage you to maybe FaceTime with a friend that has some outdoor space. Maybe, buy some National Geographics, get some nonfiction books and bring them into the household. Maybe explore the Nature Channel as a family and get excited about the things that you're seeing. Create nature bins. You can get a sensory bin at home and maybe create a landscape for dinosaurs or create a landscape for polar polar bears with rock salt and ice cubes. You can still explore with the elements and explore what it would like to be, in the painted desert by creating a diorama of the painted desert at home. Don't shy away from nature play just because it's not accessible for you, but it really does something for the child's heart, the child's spirit, their hands, their bodies, even their brains, and the connection of the family to really get outside, play outside, and really try to be one with the world. I guess that's why I'm called the crunchy mom, because I'm a little bit more granola sometimes. I love to let my kids get dirty and eat from the earth, and really be one with the earth, and recognize that we're all connected. People are all connected. We're connected to one another. We're connected through love, and we're connected to the elements of nature, the universe, the stars, the spirits, all of that. We're connected. We're all one. And by teaching children to be a part of nature and respect nature and play with nature, we're also teaching them to take care of themselves. And we're teaching them that everything is connected, and love is really the center of all of that. It really does something beautiful for the child spirit. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, I would really encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like what you've heard today. I also have a podcast, Whole Heart Crunchy Parenting, on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. Wherever it is that you get your podcast, you can just search Whole Heart Crunchy Parenting. I also put together some bucket lists for the seasons, including some outdoor play, some recipes, some books, some songs, things like that to do with your family on my Patreon page. If you sign up to be a Patreon supporter, you get access to the seasonal bucket list on there, patreon.com/wholeheart. You can also find a link to my videos, my podcast, and my blog, and learn a little bit more about me at wholeheartcrunchyparenting.com. Thank you. Be well.